Welcome to this edition of HappierMe Live. I'm Dr. Manoj Krishna, the founder of HappierMe, and today we're going to talk about company culture. It's an $8.4 trillion problem because companies with a poor culture are losing that amount of money every year around the world. My guest to explore this with me is Dr. Tim Merrick, who's an executive coach in North Carolina. And I'm also joined by guests from around the world. Welcome to you all. So, my first question to get the ball rolling, Tim, is what is culture?
If someone is not looking forward to coming to work on Monday morning, it might have something to do with culture, right?
Yes.
If people don't feel that they belong, that they feel there's, adverse competition, if they feel um, they don't, they aren't seen, that's a reflection of the culture.
Yes. Whether on Sunday evening you feel like going to work on a Monday morning, whether you're looking forward to it or not. And I think that's a very simple way of defining culture. It's, I think, also how well you feel looked after, whether
Mhm.
you feel cared for, looked after, supported, and the quality of your immediate relationships. You'll have whatever 5, 10 core people you interact with, whether you're accepted by them or not. For example, I used to have a friend of mine who is now passed. He was working at a trade union, and in their office, he was excluded from everyone else because he belonged to a different tribe. So they would go for lunch without him and little things like that. And these little things made him just not like working there, and of course impacted the culture. So yes.
It can also, what's the work that you're doing? There's an old saw in the corporate world that says you need to get the right people on the bus, then you need to get them on the right seat on the bus, right? So you need to
Mm.
make sure they're in a position that they have an opportunity to excel at, where they have some level of agency, where they feel that the work they do is meaningful. And
Mm.
so, I think good leaders help their teams find ways to express themselves, to belong in doing something that matters to them.
Yes. So how leaders lead, how teams collaborate, how decisions are made, what's rewarded. And you talked a little bit about our focus on what's wrong rather than what's missing. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I do think the simplest way of being for people who are not terribly self-aware or don't care that much, the easiest way of seeing things is what's wrong today? What am I upset about today? It's just so easy to find fault. No company is run perfectly, and there's always something that you could complain about.
Yes.
And that's the very simple way of just showing up and saying, "Ugh, I can't believe they did this. I can't believe they did that." And so it's always a focus on what's wrong. Whereas if you're solution oriented, you might be going, "Oh, okay, so what's missing here, and what can I bring, or what can I enroll other people in bringing, such that we close this gap, so that we can, we don't have to have this sense of, oh my gosh, something is wrong here."
Yes.
Sometimes it's just mindset, but sometimes it's collaborative action.
By the way, I forgot to mention that for our guests from around the world, please, we'd love your comments as we're traveling. Please add them into the chat. Um, we were talking earlier, Tim, about how when you come to work, most people come with a mindset of what leaders can do for you, what the company can do for you. But we miss an important piece, which is what am I bringing to the day, to the company, to my colleagues? What's the best of me that I'm bringing? And that mindset is often missing in organizations, don't you think?
I do, but let's take one step behind that. If I'm not feeling seen,
Hmm.
if my opinion isn't regarded, if the recommendations I make or the work I do is not celebrated, it's easy to then take yourself out of, I'm not actually part of this team,
Yes.
right? I'm just here doing widgets and making doohickeys, and that's all. And I'd really just rather go home and have a beer, you know? Um, so I do think that in order for people to look to see how they can bring improvement, they have to have been seen as an integral and important part of that team.
Yes. But I think it also reflects on what you said earlier, that it depends on your mindset. You can always focus on the thing that's missing, that's wrong. But you've overlooked the thing that's actually working, that's positive. You take what you already have for granted. And that's our mindset. That's how the human mind's wired, which is why by default, we tend to have a negative mindset. And actually, what we really need for cultures to thrive is a positive mindset.
So if that's the case, and it is human nature to look to see what is wrong so that we can survive. We must be vigilant to those things that threaten our survival.
Yes.
That's hardwired into the nervous system. And so, in a sense, civilization, on a much grander scale, civilization is around recognizing those innate tendencies and
Yes.
choosing outside of that survival mentality.
Yes. So I think this is the first point where we realize that self-awareness is really important because if you're not aware that you have a negative attitude, you're only focusing on the negative and looking at people and organizations and situations negatively, you can't then switch. So self-awareness allows self-correction. And that's one of the, we'll be talking more about that later. Okay, my next question to explore is why is it important? What are some of the numbers or what are the benefits of companies having strong cultures?
Well, you've got the data, Manoj. I'm going to let you take this
Okay,
because you
thank you.
you have been looking at this and recognizing the really the impact.
Yes, so
Um,
the numbers are startling. 21% more profitability, 18% more productivity. This is Gallup. Four times as much revenue growth, 10% higher customer ratings, five times more likely to retain people,
mm,
and
huge.
67% less burnout. So those statistics on their own should make every board in the world, in any company, sit up and say, what can we do to improve our culture? Because it affects our bottom line.
They do. I really believe that almost every company out there is concerned about it, and I know this is probably not the question you're on right now, and we'll get to it later, but how they operationalize this concept is
Yes,
where I believe companies fall down.
yes, yes.
And I'll let you
Only,
wait till we get
no, no,
there.
no. But you're right. Only one in five companies manage to have a strong culture. This is again according to Gallup. Only one in five employees feel they work for someone with a strong culture. 67% of staff are disengaged, and it costs companies, as we said, more than $8 trillion a year worldwide. So huge impact.
I want to take back something I said. I said every company wants to improve culture, and I don't actually know that that's true. I do believe if you look, if you start to take a bigger view of, corporate life from, 100 years ago till now, um, there was a predominant culture, a consciousness around, I mean, I'm almost 70, and when I was a kid, I got a job, and they say jump, and you say how high? I mean, you just show up and you do what they tell you to do,
Hmm,
and that was the mindset for quite some time. It's very, very, very top down. And if you want a job and you want to make money, darn, show up and do what we tell you to do.
hmm.
And I hate to say it, there is still vestiges of that in the corporate world. I hate to say it, but I do think it still exists. And maybe we should ask the people here on the call if they've ever seen that in corporate world as well.
Yes, just put your thoughts in the chat, please. But I think it's more subtle than that, but it's still it's not explicit, but it's much more subtle. But really, it is, especially in smaller organizations, I think. And woe betide if you disagree with the big boss. He'll send you a very polite email, but then you're marked, and there'll be a time when the reckoning will come. Okay, so the building blocks of strong cultures, I mean, just generally, Tim, what would you think they are?
We kind of touched on it a little bit before, but from an employee's standpoint, that I belong. I I matter, right? If people don't, if people aren't seen, if people don't believe that who they are is important, that productivity is always going to be way down. So that's, to me, that's central. Um, I I like when I'm working with people, quote unquote, below me in the architecture. Um, I always like to say, look, yes, I'm probably going to have the final say in whatever gets done here, but it's not up to me to figure this out. I want to know what you're thinking. Let's talk through it. In the end, yes, I'm going to make the decision,
Mm.
right? So there is this, I mean, there is a, you know, a structure here, but everyone's important.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that's, I can still be making the decision, but you can still be important in how we make that decision.
Yes. So there's a couple of points in the comments. So Sanjay is saying we need metrics that are not monetary if we're to reframe this issue. There's a human cost and a sustainability cost too. Brian's saying people don't leave companies, they leave leaders. So
Yes.
leadership culture and the way leaders steward relationships with their teams and organizations sets the tone. And effective stewardship permeates the culture and drives trust, engagement, and accountability. Thank you for that, Brian. And Sudarshan
How
said
many?
mutual trust and respect as per grid management, the number one trait of successful project team, mutual trust and respect. Yes.
How many times have you seen it? You you're working with someone, and they get a promotion, they go to another team, they get engaged, they're doing well, they get another promotion, and they find a leader who just isn't going to let them do well. There's a competition, or there is, for whatever reason, this leader is not going to give them the runway to do the kind of work that they're capable of. And
Yeah.
so I agree completely, Brian, that so many times you'll see that, and now the company loses good talent. It costs a lot. It costs more to bring someone else in. They don't have the institutional knowledge. It's a real inefficient system, and all because, and I don't know, maybe this is anecdotal, you guys can tell me, but many times I see people promoted into leadership positions because, say, they bring in clients, or they make money for the company, or they have some value, but it's not necessarily in leadership.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, I see Brian's shaking his head on that. You've seen that before. Yeah.
But also, Tim, the thing is, if I'm sitting in a lecture about culture, I'll nod my head and say all these things. I'll tick box and say yes. But when it comes to I'm under pressure, all of that goes out of the window. So we come back to that. We'll be alluding to that later about self-regulation and so on. But just to touch on a few other things, values, so honesty, innovation, well-being, how people are treated. We've talked about that. How we resolve conflict, I think that's important. Whether conflicts, whether there's a structure to resolve conflict and what companies reward, whether you reward the right traits in people. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Because that's important, don't you think?
Well, I personally believe that conflict can be incredibly productive if you've got the guardrails, if you've got the culture that says conflict is good. It's not personal conflict. It's ideation that we're trying to align, right? And that having different opinions is productive. But that requires a certain level of delicacy, I think, in teams and in leaders, to be able to say, "Hey, look, okay, good. Let's talk about why we feel differently about this." And I think a lot of folks can be threatened if they've got an idea. I've worked with a bunch of junior leaders who, when they go into a meeting, they feel like they have to have everything all figured out first to bring it to the team. And I'm
Yes.
like, wait a minute. I thought the idea of the meeting was to come together around figuring it out, not having you have the pressure and then feel you need to convince people and all of that.
Yes.
Um, but there needs to
So,
be room for that.
no, thank you. So I'm just going to share one slide, which will probably be the focus of the rest of our discussion, which is that culture is not created in boardrooms. I don't know whether people agree or disagree with that. But it's in the thousands of daily interactions that occur across an organization, and great leaders try to improve the quality of that. And what we want is to bring these skills, communication, emotional intelligence, and the positive attitude into organizations, because that's what's going to really drive culture. So, what do you think companies are getting wrong, Tim? We've talked a little bit about they say one thing and do another, or it's just a one-off annual survey. Um, can you think of other examples of where companies might be going wrong with culture?
Well, this is probably where I go off into the weeds with you, Manoj, but the ideas that we're talking about, they're words.
Hmm.
Words are representative of a reality. And you can talk about belonging, but that's just a darn word. And so you can put it into a vision statement or a mission statement. You can put it up on all the boards, but it's not a word. It is an experience.
Hmm.
And I mean, I think I mentioned to this before that for me, religion or spiritual, my spiritual life is, to me, it's about experiencing grace. It's about experiencing what some people call God. I don't mind calling it God. I just don't want to offend anyone if they don't, use that word. But I don't know how to put words around it. If you had a boardroom and it said, okay, we all, yes, we want to experience God, for instance, well, then how would you operationalize that? Any more than how do you operationalize, let's all work together collaboratively? Those are just words. And so when you say it's not created in the boardroom, you're absolutely right.
Yes.
It needs to be, it needs to be expressed in the experience, uh, and that requires a certain level of actualization of leaders, and then I don't want to use the word demand because that seems confrontational, but the strong encouragement of that experience with teams.
Yes. So, in short, you're saying you've got to actually walk the talk. You've got to embody the listening skills, the collaboration skills, the conflict management, the kindness, all of that, right? And clarity and all of those things. You can't just pay lip service to that. So this requires this inner work to be done, which again, nobody knows how to do, and you can't just do it, in a lecture, for example.
Well, we do it with coaching all the time,
Hmm.
and it's the difference between being and doing.
Yes,
What
yes,
is the being behind what you are doing?
yes. And you've got to realize that it's in your smallest actions that culture is created or not. So trust, ethics, communication, if you say one thing or do the other. And managers just aren't trained in emotional intelligence or how to get the best from their teams or how to manage, how to make decisions under pressure. And, the boss is shouting at you, but you don't pass that pressure on to the people you're managing, right? So, uh,
I like really what you just said. It's in the smallest actions. And I'm going to even maybe take it a step further. It's in the moments between action. It's in the moments between the breath.
yeah,
Our connection to ourselves. If we want to be connected to our team, we first have to embody ourselves.
yes,
And when you talk about HappierMe, when you talk about what is available, A, by using the app, but also just available out in the world, is this level of self-awareness that allows us to sit in uncertainty, to sit in conflict, to sit with pressure and still be whole
yes.
so that we can be whole with the people around us. And I guess that does bring us a little bit into the conversation of nervous system regulation.
Yes. Just a couple of comments from the guests here today. So, Linda's saying the C-suite has to embody culture, which we've discussed. Sudarshan saying the same thing. You've got to walk the talk. Sometimes leaders are rewarded for incivil behavior or bad behavior, and that sends the wrong message to everyone. And Linda says if and when culture is relegated to HR, then it becomes, performative and it gets diluted. Um, and Brian saying conflict is not the problem, it's how it's handled. Conflict reveals the heart and character guided by integrity and determines how you respond. So, yeah, conflict is on its own not a bad thing, as you said, Tim. All right. Okay. So, we've talked about the importance of now we're bringing it back to the individual. Culture is created by the thousands of daily interactions. Leave the leaders out of it because that's a well worn road. Everyone knows that's important. But people forget it's how you and I, ordinary people in the company, whether we leave the door open, whether we say please, thank you, we smile. How was your weekend? Little things that make that culture. But if I am not emotionally regulated, if I am one of the 70% of people who suffered from trauma, or one of the 80% who's struggling with stress, or 40% struggling with anxiety, or I've got problems with my teenagers or domestic abuse or whatever. I can't bring the best of me to any interaction. Technically. That's a challenge. It may have
I
nothing to do with the company at all.
Nothing. No. I was a chiropractor for my professional life, and I had a little colored dot that I put on the door jamb of my treatment rooms. And people either didn't see it or they didn't understand it. It didn't matter because it wasn't for them. As I walked into a treatment room, I looked at that dot and I touched it. And it was a message to me that says, whatever has happened today, yesterday, this week, leave all that behind. Because
Mm,
when I go into that room,
mm,
that's all there is.
mm.
It's only with that person right in front of me. I need to check myself before I wreck myself. I need to make sure that I leave all of my stuff behind.
Yes. I think
And I
we,
think,
yeah, go
go
on.
ahead.
No, no, go ahead.
What we see is what you say. We have anxiety, we have depression, we have trauma, we have defensiveness based on the trauma, we have fears of the future, we have financial insecurity, we have family issues, we have the boss putting pressure on us. I mean, there's no end of all of that.
Yes.
There
So many.
has to be a safe place for us in the universe.
Yes, yes.
What was it that Sherlock said he had a name for his Temple of Solace or something. I can't remember the name of it, right? Maybe one of you guys remember that. But we need to be able to have that space, and that does require a great level of self-awareness and discipline.
So I think two realizations are really important. One, to realize that behind everyone's smile, everyone is suffering. So small kindnesses matter. You know, just tiny words of appreciation matter. I really appreciate it. Just go out of your way to be kind. Costs you absolutely nothing. And it really is the glue that keeps this culture together. Otherwise, as you say, it's just words. And it falls apart in these tiny interactions.
It's good for the person giving that kindness.
Exactly.
I mean, it's amazing how that, even the research that says when you smile and the muscles that you activate and the nerves that go into your brain, you're shifting your mental state simply by smiling.
Yes.
Even if you have to fake it till you make it, a smile and a kind word will shift your mentality and your day for sure.
Yes. And if someone snaps at you or is snappy or whatever, you've got to realize they have no control over it. Their mind's reactive, just like yours. They're probably going through things you have no idea what's happening in their life. So a little bit of kindness goes such a long way. So I think what can we do? What can companies do with this understanding that we now have that it may be nothing to do with the company. Of course, leadership's important, all of the things are important. But let's talk about some of the practical things. And I'd love uh, guests to also add their two pennies here. What can companies do now, given this understanding, to improve things?
Well, to embody the things that we've already said,
Hmm.
it's throughout and it's not top down. So that's a very good reason to have people come off their microphones and tell us what they're thinking, because this is collaborative, because we're also trying to create the vessel here in this Zoom call. We want you to be a part of this, not listening. We are collaborating together. How do we do this? And what I've just also modeled is what leadership can bring, which is, hey, folks, how do we do this? Again, I don't have to come to this meeting and have all the answers.
No.
You all are part of this vessel today. What do you see?
Hmm.
How do we do this together? And I think every company will have their own, every team will have this own organic way of bringing this out.
Yes. I think the first thing, if I was a leader of any company, is to recognize the importance of culture, because a lot of people pay lip service to it. They don't, they more care about all the numbers, but they don't really realize the importance of culture. And so, as a leader, the first thing you do is realize it's absolutely vital to an organization. Camille has just posted that conflict on its own is not a problem, but it's the emotions tied to the conflict and how the individual chooses to handle the situation. The fear around conflict in business is that people don't feel safe disagreeing and not always aligning to every initiative or project plan. And this requires discipline and daily practice. So I think Google said that creating there's a buzzword around now, psychological safety, which is that employees need to be able to express disagreement and disagree with each other and with the boss. And it should be safe to do that, right?
And that requires guardrails. It requires a certain amount of, I don't want to get rules heavy, but it requires us to listen. It requires us not to judge. It is recommended that we don't become so attached to our own ideas that we can't hear other people's ideas. But you're right. The psychological safety based on the trauma, the anxiety, the fears, the uncertainties, right? So that we can, and I think we've kind of touched on that already. For someone to belong and be seen, they have to be able to express.
Yeah.
And I do think that there is a role for leadership because some expression will be less inclusive. And we have to then have a conversation, whether it's in the group here or with its one-on-one, to be able to say, hey, thank you so much for bringing what you did. But I noticed that when you expressed that, it seemed to cut off conversation. How do you think we can both express ourselves and make sure everyone else has an opportunity to bring their ideas, right?
Yes. Yes. So underlying all this is, I think, the importance of empowering, and I use the word empowering to empower each person to build their emotional intelligence and self awareness as a capability, skill. And alongside that comes a positive attitude. What can I bring to the company? How can I look at things more positively? Because if I have a negative mindset, then the whole culture of the company is going to get impacted by that. And this positive mindset, emotional intelligence can elevate the quality, Tim, of each of these interactions, right? Across a company.
I really like what Sudarshan has said here around integrity,
Mm,
around having values that we embody consistently, and
mm,
that is integrity,
mm.
right? And integrity doesn't mean, for me, integrity is not a morality issue. Integrity is aligning our our values, our thoughts, ideas, our speech, our actions, they all line up. And to me, that's integration, that's integrity.
Yes.
And So, yes, a company can put forth, here are our values. I'm not saying it's wrong to have it up on a whiteboard or a TV screen or have it be part of the materials that are printed, but that alone won't do it. That's just a tool that we then say, okay, here's what we're doing. And we need to keep coming back to, hey, are we doing the things that we say that we belong, that we believe in? Um, so I guess, and I apologize for sort of being so negative about the idea that, the boardroom creates these great ideas, but it's just words.
Yes, I think
Now it's up to us.
self-awareness is what gives us choice, you see. Because when I'm aware, I can then choose my response to what you're saying or doing. And I can notice my own reaction. So I can notice my protective response. I can notice I'm trying to put you down. I notice I'm trying to get my one over you. Because otherwise, our mind is just an automatic machine. And self-awareness gives me that choice. How is my decision contributing to the overall company's growth? Or is it just helping me? Because if I'm not aware of my self interest at work in the background, all I'm doing is looking after number one, which is me, not the organization that I'm part of. And so when I worked in hospital medicine, there was so much tribalism, Tim, and that really wrecked the culture of the organization. The orthopedic surgeons were fighting with the general surgeons who were fighting with the medical physician, and so on. So
And for a lot
this
of companies, it's
tribalism is so
HR,
prevalent in
right?
all organizations. Shall we talk a little bit about that? Because that destroys culture for sure.
We've just talked about inclusion and belonging, which
Mm,
is sort of the opposite, if you will. I mean, tribalism is a divisive concept, and it's also deeply rooted in a lot of people's consciousness, right?
yes, yes,
There's an unconscious bias. There is expectations, and of course, we know that whatever we expect, we actually believe we see in our world. Um, I have the hardest time. That's the hardest thing for me because I'm going to now, when I see that, I react out of my defensiveness,
yes,
right? Because of uh, growing up autistic, I knew what it was like to be on the outs and to be bullied and to be, made fun of, and so that hits that's my trauma. And that's my trigger. When I see that tribalism, I react and I have to stop and count to 10 and breathe and say, okay, how do I bring how do I bring a question to this person so that help them to answer that for
yes.
themselves?
So these things happen unconsciously. And this is again where self awareness plays a role. But we also need to train managers to regulate their emotions, stay calm under pressure. And I wanted to ask you a question you'd brought up earlier, which is managers need to remain nimble, hold many views without being emotionally attached to any one of them. That gives space for other views to be expressed.
I mean, in my mind, a leader's job is to bring up additional leaders,
Mm.
primarily. I mean, you see leaders and their job is to hold power and make sure things get done. And there's value to getting things done. But, the leadership ladder should always be that as a leader, I'm looking for the next leader. And so I'm going to be asking and curious and bringing them up and having them take responsibility for things perhaps that they're not quite ready for yet, but this will help cut their teeth. And we're always bringing up. And so how do I make room for someone else to be a leader who's going to do it differently than I do it?
Yes.
That requires me to see things like, well, okay, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? And not be attached to my way.
Now, you talked a little bit about bullying, but it's about one in four people in organizations feel bullied now. And it may
That
not
shocks me.
always be the person doing the bullying who's responsible. The person who's receiving it might misinterpret something as bullying, but whatever happens, this needs to be addressed because those one in four people don't want to be in this company anymore. And they are going to be a drain on culture, right?
So you mentioned that sometimes the person who feels or perceives bullying, whether they've experienced what they see as microaggressions or what they have seen as um, non-inclusive languaging,
It could be their
Um,
trauma, their past trauma, you see, that makes them hypersensitive to all that. And that's okay. We're not blaming anybody here. We're just saying that that's a fact, can happen.
so the difficult question that I ask y'all here is I see the pendulum swing between too bad, you deal with it, all the way to oh my gosh, the company has to change everything in their speech and everyone has to be, overly careful about everything they say. And when it comes to personal responsibility, when I feel I have been abused, for that's a very strong term, but when I feel people's speech or actions that are aggressive and antithetical to my belonging, I have a responsibility to speak up, but I also have a responsibility to, I'm not a child anymore. I can't react at it as a child. I have to take some responsibility for why this is affecting me the way it is. And that's not talked about in our whole country very much.
Exactly, exactly, Tim. Let's talk about that. That's so important that whenever I feel something, I need to blame somebody for how I'm feeling. I never take ownership and think, that could be a reaction from my thinking and my past that has nothing to do with what's happening outside. It's a trigger, but the reaction's mine. I need to own that.
And it might have something to do with what someone said.
It might do,
Someone
of
said
course.
something that was absolutely non-inclusive of my existence.
Yes,
I still have a responsibility to self-regulate and to advocate appropriately.
yes, yes,
And that without anger, without, I still need to come at it from a whole person perspective.
yes,
And that's not easy to do. And that requires enormous self-awareness, but it also requires support from the rest of the team that I can say, hold on. I mean, I used to belong to a men's group and we got into all kinds of stuff and we really talked about the nitty gritty. And when I talked about my autism, they were like, they just wouldn't buy it. They're like, oh no, you're, and they would gaslight me because they said, well, you're so good at communicating. How could you possibly be autistic? And that is such a hurtful thing to say.
mm,
And I had to be able to say, wow, that hurts.
mm.
And you know what? It's wrong for you to say it. And now we need to have this conversation, right? I can't just slink off and say, take my bat and ball and go home. I have to be able to engage.
And that requires courage, right, Tim? Courage in communication, clarity, all that. So self-awareness on this bullying thing can help the person doing the bullying reflect on their behavior and say, how is this being impacted? And of course, the person who's feeling bullied to ask, could it be my past? Am I reacting in a way that this may not be bullying, for example? It's very complex, but self-awareness can help with both sides of that equation.
And I don't
Okay.
know, I don't know how much it gets into the corporate world at all because, but the concept of restorative justice, where I don't, are you familiar with the phrase even? I see it, I'm on the school board, and so we do get into it in schools when we look at adverse behavior rather than punishment to bring in everyone who's impacted by that and confronting and discussing what's happened. It helps that person who's made, who has had the inappropriate behavior to understand how it impacts everybody else.
Yes.
And it's shown to be so much more effective than, punishment. It- you know, Negative reinforcement is not terribly effective.
No. Okay. Let's pause there, Tim, because we've got such great insights from so many people here, and I'd love to bring them all in one by one. So,
So I think a couple. First of all, Manoj, thanks for inviting me. When it comes to bullying, we see it through the culture, and as someone who kind of runs an organization of hundreds of people spread across 15 different countries, you see it in a lot of different ways, right? I can't be in the office with every single person, so it kind of comes with First of all, intentionality and recognizing where we as a leader stand, right? Where can we actually reach out to individuals out there inside of our organization? So I think Linda asked the question, what are other leaders doing to kind of sort of, fight bullying, fight the culture shift? And there's a couple of ways that I do it, but specifically, one way is we do one-on-ones, we do skip levels. Doors always open. There's always a mention of that I'm a safe space for my individual employees, even though there's hundreds of them. That I want them to know that there's a safe space. I also permeate that down to my leaders who are multi-leaders deep inside of my organization, that they are also required to listen, to be sponges, to listen first before they speak. I think Tim kind of sort of pulled a point out of this, which is, fighting it yourself first, right? A lot of times we often, want to talk over to someone. We want to talk down to someone. We think too often about what we want to say next. And instead of listening to the rest of the person's point, that we hear a point and we go, all right, I got to formulate my response. It's okay to pause. It's okay to take a step back. It's okay to let that person finish. It's okay to ask questions. And I think that's kind of one way that we fight bullying within ourselves, but we also permeate that within our leadership culture, is to pause for a moment, let them finish speaking, let them talk. I think it's super important for leaders to be more listeners than talkers. I think that is super important for us as leaders, and that's another way we fight that bullying. Is because if we're cutting someone off, we're talking over them, we're talking down to them, we're constantly correcting them, especially in public scenarios. Because I do work inside of an office, with a lot of people here as well. One of the things I do daily is I actually walk around. I walk around, shake hands of the employees. Again, they're 3 or 4 layers deep from me, but I make sure they know they're seen. They know that they're heard. They know that my door is open. And so as I'm meeting with them on a regular basis, that I'm walking, I go have lunch with them. I sit down in the middle of their cubicles and I have lunch with folks. So it's all about, intentionality from a leadership perspective. And that starts with us, right? But how we permeate that down to our next layer of leader, and then their next layer of leader, and their next layer of leader. And if you see a spot where it is failing, it is incumbent upon that leader to, skip level, right? Is what I call it, and again, go down to that next layer. So those are just some of the thoughts and some of the things that I do
Thank
personally, but I think might help others.
But I think, Brian, would you say that your ability to regulate your emotions and understand what's happening in your own mind is key to all the things you've talked about, right?
It is 100% key, and I think it comes down to a term that I frequently tell people. It's your intentions, right? On how you want to be perceived, number one, but also how you want others to see themselves, right? I mean, I want to be seen as a leader that people can come to me, but I also want them to know that they're seen as a valuable part of my organization. And that's not just a leadership from a corporate perspective, but that's outside. I had Tim was just talking about a men's group. I was part of a men's group last night. One of the conversations that came up was the importance of how we react as people to the bus person who's coming to clear the table, or to the person who's food running, or the person who's waiting on us, or to the person who just sat us down. What are our actions to that person? You might be the only smile they get. You might be the only kind word. You might be the only thank you they get that day. And so it becomes incumbent upon us to be that kind of sort of reflection of kindness out to the world. But that comes with intention, right? That doesn't a lot of times doesn't just happen. There are some of us who are naturally kind individuals, but we're also naturally, inward thinking. What can I get out of this? What can I do? And what's going to be in it for me? So we have to be very intentional in changing our mindset. Manoj, you and I talked the other day, and one of the terms I used was retooling your mindset. It really
Yes, I
comes
like.
down to retooling your mindset about how we do things, and that is that the reaction of retooling your mindset is intentionality. And how we'd actually do those things. So
Okay.
I didn't mean to take over the conversation
No,
here.
no, thank
That
you.
was not
Thank
my
you.
intention, but
Very
You know
helpful.
what
So,
really hit me, Brian, and it sounds so simple because we hear this all the time. Oh, we need to listen more, speak less. But before, in the very beginning of this conversation, I talked about the moments between the moments, the moments between our thoughts, the moments between our actions. And, as you're talking, I noticed 4 or 5 things I wanted to say, but I just cleared my mind and let it be. And I realize how powerful it is if I listen to you speak all the way, and if we're talking just one on one and we're done, and there's just no speech for a minute, we look at that and go, okay, well, now what? Right? It's slowing that right down. And so now what's happening is, Brian, you and I are together. We're connected in that moment. Now we can start trying to find solutions together. Now we can see what's really in front of us instead of both being attached to an idea that we have to get across. And that connection, that beingness with each other, I think comes first.
Tim, that reminds me of a custom in the Lakota tribe in North America, where it was customary for exactly what you said, for a pause after somebody has spoken before somebody else starts talking. So some things are um, so important. Camille is a very senior HR executive and been working with me. So Camille, what are your two pennies on what we've discussed today about culture?
Yeah, no, thank you. And sorry, I'm not on camera. I'm actually on baby duty. But so when I think about I've coached a lot of senior yes, I'll give you another one. I've seen leaders at all levels in an organization struggle with their people strategy, and I think that the idea is that the people strategy is solely the HR team's function, right? And I think that as HR leaders, and I've talked to other HR business partners, is when you're coaching and developing leaders, that is something that you have to put at the top of their radar because they're always going to have a strategic overview for what they have to accomplish in their business. But how does that align to your people strategy? And the thing that I've done in the past that have helped leaders build stronger relationships with their teams is saying to them, how are you thinking about that communication? Even the smallest thing. Yes, it may you're thinking about how you're delivering a communication. You're delivering that communication based off of how you believe you would receive that information, not on how the team members at all levels under in your organization will receive that. And that needs to be a really intentional and thoughtful structure, right? The communication strategy, the plan, because how you deliver information, when you deliver information, that is the start of culture and how people feel valued or not valued, right? Am I left out of something? Am I brought into something? And then the other thing I tell leaders when I coach them is to say, make sure your one-on-ones are not just about checking in on how work is going or a project is going. Talk to the person, even if it's one-on-one out of the month. It is focused on what they want to talk about, their career development, things that they're struggling with, and you keep detailed notes on that so that you can circle back and check in with them. It's not going to be this thing where everybody has this overly empathetic personality or characteristic. Sometimes people have to work at it. Sometimes leaders who are more business focused and numbers focused need a little help. And that means giving them a little bit of a guide of what questions to ask, how to track those answers, and how to circle back to them so people feel like you listen to them and you're actually caring about what is impacting them and their daily lives.
I want to go
So
back to something that Camille said a bit ago about leaders checking in, not just about how the work is going,
Hmm.
but how you are doing, right? The company that I worked with that had the best culture, the CEO, and I used to really question, how are you getting any work done? I was the chair of the board, and I would work with the CEO, and the CEO would, like, it seemed to me all she did all day was go and sit in the different uh, senior staff offices. How you doing today? How's your husband? What happened with that surgery? She would just spend time connecting and make sure people were valued and that they could bring themselves to their job. Yes, of course, there had to be an umbrella of, here are the expectations and here are the hats that everybody wears, and this is what needs to get done. But in and around that, it was always people centered.
Yes.
And I think Camille hit on that really well. It's We're all just humans. And when we talk about feeling heard and connected and belonging, we've got to bring our humanness to the job, and we have to be respected for that.
Yes.
Um, Camille, thank you for bringing that.
Well, thank you everyone we're coming to the top of the hour and I'm going to start winding up, but it's been such a rich discussion and everyone's contributions have been really valuable. I'm going to give everyone a chance to put their 2 pennies in a second. But for me, in closing, I'd like to say that culture is important, number one. It's built through the thousands of daily interactions across the company. And remember the stats I mentioned earlier, about 80% of people are suffering in some way or the other, whatever name you call it. And that's affecting how they show up, how they interact. So have some empathy and kindness, even though they're smiling, realize that your small acts of kindness, as Brian said, make a real difference. And self-awareness and emotional intelligence should not just be for the leaders and managers, but for everybody in the organization so that you can show up with a positive attitude, with kindness, putting your self-interest to one side, putting your fears and anxieties to one side, your competitive nature to one side, so you can all show up really in the best interests of the organization. Anyway, but we could go on. But thank you everyone for coming and for sharing your insights, and I will share this recording with everyone. Thank you.